Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is George Slackegg, and what you see right behind me, that's the engine bay of my pickup truck. Right now this cooling system doesn't have any stuff in there. It's empty because I drained it. So we're gonna change that. Gonna put just plain water in there. The truck's cold, hasn't been running. The water from the garden hose is warm from the sun, and you know, the reason I mention this is because when you ever have a truck that is already warmed up, you're not supposed to put cold water from a tap or from a hose in there, because there's a potential to crack things. I will be disconnecting this hose from the radiator, and I'm going to make an adapter to put my garden hose right there going into the radiator. Put the cap back on, and then this hose will be tied right here so it can drain out whatever is in there. The engine needs to be flushed. There's probably a bunch of rust in there, possibly dirt, so we're going to flush all that out before we put new stuff in there. Alright, I did the setup off camera because I wasn't sure how I was going to do it, but I'll show you. It turned out good. Good thing I have a shop vac because it's got the right adapter for my radiator pipe hose. It's hooked up right here. So this water that is coming out is going to splash into the driveway. Going to blend in with the dirt in the driveway. And my garden hose, it's attached here. I made an adapter from an old bicycle tube. The radiator cap has to go back on. Let's start the engine. Time to turn on the garden hose. Back to the truck. Gotta observe this, see what happens. Truck's still running. That's a good sign. With the thermostat removed, water is now circulating through the entire system and coming out that tube. Still got a little bit of green color, but I think it's mostly rust. All I gotta do now is wait until the water comes out clear, and then all that dirt that's in my cooling system theoretically will be flushed out. There's no thermostat in there, by the way. That's why it's circulating freely. So let's keep an eye on it. I'm happy with that. Let's turn everything off. Yeah, the water stopped running. Of course, now I gotta drain the tap water out of there, and then I can fill it up with clean antifreeze, and then put some distilled water in there too. There's one thing that's sometimes forgotten: the overflow tank. Mine had some green guck in it, but it wasn't really that bad. This is what came out of it. I'm putting this in a container to dispose of. Yeah, I don't think there's any guck left in there. See, it goes right in here, and then those bolts, I mean, look at this rust. So this one was really hard to remove, so I'm going to put some anti-seize on there. There's no reason for it to be that hard to take off. Now my thermostat came without a gasket, but this gasket here actually gotten really hard. I also got this cardboard here. Worst comes to worst, I could make my own gasket. But I got this stuff here. This is sensor safe. This, I'm going to use it on the, what is the knock sensor also. Yeah, last night when I drained the antifreeze on the passenger side of the engine block, there's a sensor there. And at first, well, what sensor would be in the coolant on the bottom of the engine block? I figured it'd be a temperature sensor, but it turns out, as one of you has rightfully pointed out, this is a knock sensor. So when I take this out again to drain the liquid, I am probably going to test it with a hammer, you know, see if there's a reading. because it's supposed to give a reading when you knock it. That's what it does, you know. It gives a signal to the ECM when the engine is too advanced, so it'll then retard the ignition or something. When it gets too advanced, the engine starts knocking. So the ignition system, the timing, there's actually quite a few things that are involved. I'll be taking out the thermostat housing again and see if I could rig up the gasket with the stuff. All right, let's go down there and tackle that knock sensor. Yeah, see, it's up there. Yesterday you couldn't see that it was that shape because it was full of dirt. The stuff's gonna pour out of there and I don't want to get that in my face. Yeah, now maybe. See, there should be clean water coming out of there, nothing else. I'm here like squeezed under the truck watching this. I'm surprised how much water is in the lock. Yeah, it's a lot. And it's 3/4 full now. This poor GoPro camera gets mucked up from all this stuff. See, this is it here, the knock sensor. There's a way of testing it. Put it on AC voltage, knock it in a vise. So this is perfect. This is a fitting from my compressor. A quick connect on this side. On the other side is just a female pipe thread, 1/2 inch. And that's happens to be the same as the knock sensor. So I can put this in there so I don't destroy my threads as I'm putting it in the vise. See, put her in here. So it's not the most accurate, but as long as I see the needle move there, I'll be okay, happy with it. But there you go, see? You see that? That to me is good enough. I don't have a digital multimeter, and this is the sensitivity is 12 volts. I knock it lightly, it goes up to about 1 or so volts. That means the sensor is functional, and I'm not going to worry about it too much right now because that thing is like 50 bucks. For now, I'm confirmed that this is working and it just needs to be hooked up. So this beautiful knock sensor has a pipe thread here, 1/2 inch. It also needs to be sealed a little bit, so I'm using this ultra gray. It is good for a temperature of -54 Celsius to 232 Celsius. So stuff's perfect. All right, nice and shady under the truck. And we're going to put the RTV on silicone stuff. As long as it fills the gap between those threads, it's good. This stuff has like it is sensor safe, so it means you can put it without losing ground. It's extremely uncomfortable under here, I tell you. It's going in there, guys. Oh, you know, get the ratchet, tighten her up. See, I could see it better. See, like this. Yeah. Well, more fun and games under the truck. And I can barely see this. You can probably see it better than I do. It should be mostly water. Mostly fairly clean water. Yeah, it's coming. Oh no. There we go. That's it. Still quite a bit there. Last thing to do on this cooling system, aside from the knock sensor wires, is the thermostat. I'm gonna use some RTV on here, but it's not all I'm gonna do. I'm also gonna install a gasket on it, believe it or not, because I made one myself. I'm gonna do this slowly because it's the same color as my manifold. I make sure I don't miss a spot. This should be enough. Go around with my finger, make sure it is evenly spread. Guys, that's how I do it. There's different ways. You can put it directly on the gasket, both sides. I do it this way. It's never failed me. Here's my gasket. It is homemade. Couldn't help myself. I always feel better when it's there. Now we got to get the thermostat itself. There we go. Now I apply the same kind of bead to the other side of the gasket. There, that's enough. Spread this once again, slowly and carefully with my index finger. I'm going to put the housing on there, and that's just going to be finger tight. So we're going to tighten this just a little, just finger tight kind of thing. This is good enough for now. Later on, after an hour or so, I can torque it down. I don't know if this paper gasket is really necessary. It's just the way I've done it for years and years, and I still do feel better with the gasket there, whether it's homemade or it's bought. This one's homemade. So guys, it's now quite a while later. The camera battery quit after I tightened that thermostat housing down, but however, I continued working on it because I wanted to get this cooling system done, and I'll show you what I did. Well, first trip was to Walmart because that seems where the stuff is cheapest, and I bought this 10-year 500,000 kilometer guaranteed Prestone. 3 containers like that, they're 1 gallon each. I also bought distilled water, 2 of these. First I filled this cooling system just cold to the top that the radiator is full, then started the truck. Then you feel when the water is starting to circulate because the thermostat is open. Let it run a bit longer, then shut her off. And then you basically wait until the system cools down. Only then you open the radiator cap because you have to be sure all pressure is gone from there. And then you can top it up. Again, I eyeballed the ratio between the coolant and the water, and it's got to be distilled water because anything that comes out of the tap, you don't know what kind of minerals are in there, and they can affect your cooling system, so you don't want that. Distilled water doesn't do that. On your Prestone, there'll be a chart that'll tell you the mixing ratio and the temperature it'll protect your truck to. Now, I eyeballed this for now, making sure that there's a slightly more coolant in there than there's water, because this is Edmonton, Alberta, where the weather in the winter time, you know, temperatures can actually drop to -40 and that is in Fahrenheit. I don't even know what that is, but it's crazy cold. So I don't want my block to crack or anything, so that's an insurance. But the best way for me, since I eyeballed this, to make sure is before the winter, I'm gonna get hold of a hydrometer and I'm gonna actually check the stuff that's in there to make sure that that it's good. Also, you have your expansion tank here, and there's a line on there that is fairly low. You can see the green stuff down there. As long as you see fluid in there when it's cold, you're good. This is kind of just a tank that catches the overflow. Back in the old days, they didn't have that. There was a hose just coming out of the radiator, and when it got too hot, it just came out of there. And then eventually you'd have to just check your coolant level. Now you can check the coolant level on there because the system is like a closed system, so no fluid will go missing. It just overflows, and then as the truck cools down, it'll go back into the radiator. I hope that helps somebody. This is an easy way to flush your cooling system by yourself. Now, before you do this thing that I did with the vacuum cleaner tube, where the water just comes out and goes into the driveway, make sure that you actually drain the old coolant and dispose of it properly, because that could do harm to the environment. Your cats and dogs might like the smell of it, might decide to lick it and get sick. maybe even die. So if you got something out of this video, you can give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next one.